That's all record done. All right, so y'all should be seeing my screen. And this will be the review quiz that y'all can also do that's in MATLAB to get you really good for the test. So let me see. I'm going to write this problem down. 6y plus 3x equals 9. So I'm going to work this out, and then we'll come back and actually put in our answers. So let me let more people in real quick. All right, so usually what I do to these, I solve these for the y, and then you can use your calculator to graph it or find some points to graph it. So to solve this for the y, I'm going to move the 3x to the other side by subtracting it. So that'll bring my 6y down. Those 3x's cancel on the left side. So these are not like terms, so I'm just going to put them in order of the x first and then the number. That way it looks like y equals mx plus b form. Then what I do is make that 6y a 1y, so I'm going to divide everybody by 6. And then reduce. So the 6's cancel and I get my y equals negative 3, 6. I'm going to reduce that to a negative 1/2 x. And remember, you can reduce fractions on the calculator by dividing them and then hitting math and enter twice, and it'll give you the reduced form. And then that 9 divided by 6 will reduce also. So I got a decimal. Let me turn that back into a fraction, and that'll turn into a 3/2. So I'm going to be graphing y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3/2. So let me go back to my screen. All right, so I'm going to click on my graph. All right, so on my calculator, I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to graph that equation we just found. So I got y equals negative 1 divided by 2 x plus 3 divided by 2. So let me go to the table by hitting second graph. So let's see, at negative 1, my y value is 2, and I'm trying to find some that have nice values. So I don't want to use 0 because that's giving me 1.5, but I will use 1 because at 1, it gives me a value of 1. So I just needed 2 points. So let's see, we know we got a straight line, so we would click the straight line tool. My first point was negative 1 up 2. Then my second point was over 1 and up 1. Now, if you wanted to verify that, just hit graph on the calculator. And then you'll see that that is on there. All right, so let me go back to my calculator now. All right, so here I had the y equals and I put in my graph. So I went to the table to get my 2 points that I needed. And then I hit graph to verify that it looked just like the line we had on the screen, which it does, so we're happy. All right, so I need to move to the next one. So I'm going to go to number 2. So this wants me to graph y equals x squared plus 2. And y'all, I'm gonna work that real quick, show you some points I would pick. And anytime you got an x squared graph in this section, the three numbers you want to use are -1, 0, and +1. That way you can get the vertex of that graph, because that's the first point we're going to have to graph on this. So if I put a -1 in, -1 squared plus 2, well, -1 squared will give me 1, and 1 plus 2 will give me 3. So when x is -1, y is 3. Then I'm going to put my 0 in. 0 squared plus 2 will give me 0 plus 2, which is 2. So it's still true. You put a 0 in for the x, the y value is going to be that number. And then we would put a 1 in. 1 squared plus 2. Well, 1 squared is 1, and 1 plus 2 would give me 3. So remember, these x squared graphs are symmetric, and you notice on either side of that 0, 2, my -1 and my 1 both have y values of 3. So I got 3 points here. So let me go back to the test. So I'm going to click on the graph. Now on the x squareds, you need this quadratic graphing tool. So click it. And remember, the first point I got to plot is the 0, 2, because that's the center of it. So I go up 0, 2, click that. Then I'm going to go on the left side and plot -1, 3. So there's -1, 3. And then I'm going to plot a +1 and a 3. So there's my +1, 3. Okay, so I would save that. And then I'm going to go to my next question. All right, absolute value. Y equals absolute value of x plus 6. All right, so on the absolute value, I'm going to put 3 numbers, but really you only need 2, because this tool will graph it all the way for us. So my first point I pick for an x is whatever makes this inside equals 0. So since that's a +6, my first x will be a -6. So if you did 3 points, that would be your middle point. And then on either side, you could do a -5 and a -7. So let me put my -5 in here. -5 plus 6 is 1, and the absolute value of 1 is 1. Then you would put the -6 in there. -6 plus 6 is 0. Absolute value of 0 is 0. And then when I put that -7 in, -7 plus 6 is -1. Absolute value of -1 is 1. And remember, on here, you can do these on the calculator. If you hit math and go over the number, the first thing you see is absolute value. So like that last one I did, -7 plus 6, you can put that inside the bars and hit enter, and it'll give you that 1. All right, so let me show you this on the calculator. Let me clear this. So I would hit my absolute value first, math, number, enter, and then put in the x plus 6. All right, now when I hit the table, you'll see on the table, I was around -5. So there at -6 is my 0. Then notice you get 1s on either side, and then 2s on either side of the 1s, and so on. So let's go graph this. So I would click the graph. All right, so absolute value is the V looking tool, and it'll say absolute value when you hover over it. So click that. Remember, the first point I got to plot is -6, 0. So I'm going to go over here to -6, 0, click enter. And then now you only have to do one of the other points, and it'll draw the line for you. So I'm going to do my point that was -5, 1, right there. So it's drawn the whole graph. So we're good to go. So we save that, and then we move on. All right, y'all, this wants to know if this is a function. So if this is a function, each one of these x values in the domain can only point to one y value. So -3 only points to the 2, +3 only points to the 2, 8 only points to the 2. So this is yes, because each element of the domain corresponds to exactly one element in the range. So click B on that one, and then we're moving on. So remember, every domain can only have one range value for that question. All right, so let me write this real quick. I got f of x equals 2x squared minus 5x, and I'm finding f of 0, f of a -1, and f of 2. So the calculator knocked these out pretty quick if you just put numbers in for those x's. So I'm going to go back to my pad and work these real quick by hand. So f of 0 wants me to take that equation and put a 0 in for both of those x's. So f of 0 will equal 2 times 0 squared minus 5 times 0. So y'all, since I got zeros in both of these, 0 squared is 0, 0 times 2 is 0, minus 5 times 0 is 0. So that's going to give me a big 0. So anytime you're putting a 0 in for the x's, and that x is in every single term, that answer will be 0. All right, next we had f of -1. That's going to equal 2 times -1 squared minus 5 times a -1. So what kills people on this one is they try to multiply the 2 times a -1 first. No, no, no. You got to do the exponent first. So bring down that 2. That 2 will multiply by whatever -1 squared is. Well, -1 times -1 is a +1. And then that'll be minus 5 times my -1. So I just did the exponent on that step. Now I'll do all my multiplying. 2 times 1 is 2. -5 times -1 is a +5. And then finally, y'all, 2 plus 5 is 7. But y'all watch this. 2 and then parentheses, -1. Square that. Minus 5, parentheses, -1. So I can put it just like it looks and still get my 7 out of that. Right, now let me do f of 2. F of 2 will equal 2 times 2 squared minus 5 times 2. All right, so once again, do the exponent first. So I'm going to bring down that 2. 2 squared is 2 times 2 is 4 minus 5 times 2. All right, 2 times 4 is 8. Minus 5 times 2 is 10. And y'all, 8 minus 10 will give me a -2. So I got my 3 answers. I'm going to go back to my screen and put in them answers. And it should ask them, let's see, f of 0 we said was 0. F of -1, I got a 7. And then f of 2, I got a -2. All right, then we can move on to the next one. All right, let's see. Graph f of x equals 3 minus absolute value of x. Now I'm going to set up my table they're giving me. They're giving me x is -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So they're sort of giving me the numbers on this one to work with. So let me go to the paper and work these out real quick, and then we'll come back and plot the lines. All right, so remember, absolute value has priorities on order of operations. So the first one you're going to have is 3 minus absolute value of -2. So bring down to 3 minus absolute value of -2 is 2, and then 3 minus 2 would give us 1. Then we put in a -1. 3 minus absolute value of -1 will be 3 minus absolute value of -1 is a 1, and then 3 minus 1 gives us 2. Okay, now we put in a 0, so 3 minus absolute value of 0 is 3 minus 0, which will give us 3. All right, now we put in a 1. 3 minus absolute value of 1 is 3 minus 1, which will give me 2. So now, since it's absolute value, you're starting to see I've got my symmetry going on. So I bet this one will be probably a 1 like it was at the -2. So 3 minus absolute value of 2 is 3 minus 2, which is 1. All right, so I got my points. So let's go see what they want me to do on the graph. Now remember, since this is a absolute value, I only need 2 points on this, okay? So I'm going to pick my absolute value tool. The first point has to be 0, 3 because that's the vertex. So I go to 0, 3, hit enter. Then I'm going to plot 1, 2. So go to 1 and then up 2 and hit enter. So that sort of flipped it over. All right, y'all, let's see. That's 6. So let's go to number 7. So let me save that and then go to 7. Oh, hold on. There must be more parts. Oh, I got to put in the numbers. Okay, my bad. So I had a 1, a 2, a 3, and then I had a 2 and a 1. All right, then we graphed it. So now we can move on to the next one. All right, y'all, this one says graph f of x equals -x squared plus 4. And they're giving me the same numbers, right? -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. All right, so let's switch over, knock them out, and then we'll plot these. All right, so when you work this, remember that negative is in this formula. So you got to write the negative, then put in your x, which is a -2 squared plus 4. Once again, bring down that negative because it's not in the parentheses. -2 squared is -2 times -2, which is a 4. And then plus 4. And y'all, -4 plus 4 gives us 0. Then we'll put in -1. We got -1 squared plus 4. So bring down that negative. -1 squared is 1. And then plus 4. And then -1 plus 4 is 3. So watch, you can do these on the calculator. So just remember, put that first negative in, then put in your -1, square that, and then add that 4. And that'll spit out a 3 really quick. All right, when I put in a 0, I got negative 0 squared plus 4. Well, 0 squared is 0, times that negative is 0. So this is 0 plus 4, which is 4. All right, we put a 1 in. We got negative 1 squared plus 4. Well, y'all bring down that negative. 1 squared is 1 plus 4. Negative 1 plus 4 is 3. So now you're starting to see the symmetry on either side. So we're probably going to get a 0 for this one. So negative 2 squared plus 4. Remember, 2 squared is 4. So you get negative 4 plus 4, which is 0. So this one, since it's quadratic, will need 3 points, and I'm going to start with that 0, 4, and then do 1 point on each side. So let's go to graph that, and I'm sure it's going to want me to put all these numbers in real quick. So let's see. At negative 2, we had a 0. Then I had a 3. Then at 0, I had a 4. At 1, I had a 3. And then at 2, I had a 0. So we got our points in. Now we click the graph. So quadratic, we used the quadratic tool. First point has to be the 0, 4. And then I'm going to do my 1, 3. And then I'll do negative 1, 3. And then click that, save, and move on. All right, so it wants to know if that graph is a function. So what I would do is run me a vertical line up and down, left to right. If it's a function, it can only intersect that graph once. But notice, if you run left to right, it's going to intersect the graph twice everywhere, other than maybe that very first point. So since it's going to intersect it more than once, this would be a no. All right, moving on to 9. All right, so I got to find a lot of stuff on this one. So first of all, it wants me to find f of 2. So f of 2 means what is the y value when the x value is a 2? So come over here, find 2 on the x-axis, and go straight up. And it looks like that y value is also a 2. So f of 2 is 2. So you're just looking for the y value that corresponds to that x value of 2 on that, okay? Now it wants to know the domain. So the domain is the x's here. But y'all, this graph has arrows that keep going forever to the left. It has arrows that keep going forever to the right. So since I'm going forever to the left, forever to the right, the domain would be all real numbers. All right, notice now it wants to know for what x values if f of x equal 3. So now we want to find where the y value of 3 is and go over here and see what x values correspond to these two y values of 3. So let's follow 3 on the y's. So I got a point right here, which is at the x of 1. So 1 would be my first x. So I'm going to put a 1 and a comma. Then if you notice, follow that 3 across on that y. It also hits right. Well, let me zoom that in a second. So if you have trouble looking at them, just zoom it in. So there was the first 3 at 1. And then the second 3 looks like it's a 7. So that would be a 1, comma, 7. All right, so let's see what's next. What is the range? Now the range is the y values. Now remember, the smallest y value is sitting on is at the 0 right here on the x-axis. It does not go below the x-axis, so the range cannot be negative. So the range looks like it's going to start at this 0, and it's going to keep going up forever. So, and it does equal 0 at that point. So we need one of these that says it's going to be greater than or equal, which looks like C, greater than or equal to 0. So remember, left to right is your domain, which is your x's. Up and down is your range, which is your y values. All right, I think we got all that answered, so we would move on to the next. All right, so number 10 wants me to find the domain. So let me write this down real quick. I got g of x equals 9 divided by 3 minus 5x. So I'm going to go work this first, and then we'll come back and stick it on. All right, so remember, my domain, I've got a fraction. So the only thing I'm worried about on that fraction is the denominator. So I took that 3 minus 5x and said it could not equal 0. And then I solved it. So first I would what? Subtract 3 from both sides. I get negative 5x cannot equal a negative 3. And then divide by negative 5. So that cancels. I get x cannot equal, two negatives make a positive, so that's going to make a 3/5. So let's go back now. So the only number that my x cannot be is a 3/5. So let's see what they're saying over here. Oh, no, watch out now, because we're not saying x can be greater than or equal to 3/5. We're saying x cannot equal 3/5, which would be C. So we got C, then we move on to number 11. All right, so now we're doing f of x equals a negative 13x plus 13. G of x is going to equal x squared plus 15. I'm going to find f of negative 2 divided by a g of negative 2. So let's go back and work this. All right, so f of negative 2 divided by g of negative 2. I'm going to put my f on top divided by my g. Now I'm putting parentheses because if you did this on the calculator, you would have to put parentheses around the top and the bottom. All right, so f is on top, so that's negative 13 times x, which they want me to put in a negative 2. And then I got a plus 13. So you still got negative 13x plus 13. The bottom has an x squared plus 15. So that'll be negative 2 squared plus 15. Since you're doing a negative number, put the negative number in parentheses. All right, so I'd work the top. Negative 13 times negative 2 is 26 plus 13. On the bottom, negative 2 squared is a positive 4 plus 15. All right, we can keep going. 26 and 13 is 39. 4 plus 15 is 19. And y'all, I don't believe that'll reduce anymore. But let me show you what you would do. If you did it on the calculator, you would put parentheses, negative 13, parentheses, negative 2, and then plus 13, close parentheses. Then divide parentheses. I'm going to put extra parentheses around my negative 2, square that, plus 15, close parentheses. Now, we know it's going to give me a decimal when I hit enter, so I would hit math and enter twice, and that looks like a 39 over 19. All right, so we're good to go on that, so we would go back. Put in my 39 divided by, whoops, I had 19 there, my bad. 39 over 19, and then we would move on. All right, so I'm going to write this one. This is g minus f. So let me get my g. G of x is a x squared minus 3. F of x is a negative 3x plus 3. We're finding g minus f of x. All right, so subtraction, g minus f of x will equal my g minus my f. My g is x squared minus 3. My f is a negative 3x plus 3. So remember, on subtraction, you would drop the first parentheses and bring down the x squared minus 3. But the subtraction, you got to distribute. So a negative times a negative makes that a positive 3x. And then that negative times that positive 3 makes that a negative 3. Usually if people miss it, it's because of that one sign. They didn't distribute their negative, okay? So now you would add like terms. So I would bring down the x squared. Then I would bring down the plus 3x. Then this negative 3 will add to that negative 3, making a negative 6. So we would go back and punch in x squared. So x, and then you got to use this little button down here with the blue box and square it. Then arrow over and get out of that and put in your plus 3x and then minus 6. All right, once we got that in, we would arrow over to go to the next one. All right, what's this one say? F minus g of a negative 5. And they're giving me f of x is a x squared minus 20. And g of x is a 11 minus x. So subtraction again. Now, let me, where I can see that, my paper's in the way. Alrighty, so x squared minus 20, 11 minus x, and they want me to find f minus g of negative 5. So f minus g of a negative 5 will equal f of that negative 5 minus g of that negative 5. So we're going to put negative 5 in for all the x's. So first will be my f. F is x squared minus 20. So that'll be negative 5 squared minus 20. Then g is 11 minus x. So that's going to be 11 minus a negative 5. So we're going to do order of operations inside of each parenthesis. So first you would square the negative 5. So negative 5 times negative 5 is 25 minus 20. Over here, 11 minus a negative 5 would be like 11 plus 5. All right, so let's see what I get. 25 minus 20 is 5, minus 11 plus 5 is 16. And y'all, 5 minus 16 would give us a negative 11. So we would come back, put in our negative 11. Oh, let me get my keyboard. Negative 11 we said, and then move on. Oh, here's the big one. We're going to find the, okay, we're going to find the domain. And it don't even ask us what the function's equal. They just want to know the domains. So first I'll look at, if I was going to add these two functions, well, the first one I would have to worry about that being a fraction before I could add it to this. So since that's a fraction and I got an x in the denominator, there's one number that the x cannot equal. So you would take that bottom. So what's that? 1 over x minus 4. And then g of x is a 5x to the third. All right, so if I was going to add these, f plus g of x would equal f of x, which is 1 over x minus 4, plus g of x, which is 5x to the third. Remember, the only thing we're worried about on a domain is a fraction. So since we do have a fraction, we know that x minus 4 cannot equal 0. So solving that, we would add 4 to both sides, and x cannot equal a positive 4. So what would happen is you would go back and pick the one right here. It says x is a real number, and then we would put in x. Down here they got the not equal, and then put in our 4. And then we would do that on the difference. And y'all, the difference is going to be the same way because you're going to have 1 over x minus 4 minus 5x to the third. So once again, the only thing you're worried about is the fraction. So this would also be x cannot equal 4. And then guess what? If you was multiplying those, you would have 1 over x minus 4 times the 5x to the third. So you still have that fraction you got to worry about. So this would still be what? X cannot equal a 4. So really on this problem, once you figure out the domain from the first one, since we don't have to divide on this one, it's going to be the same answer on all three of these pretty much. All right, so we put in that, then we will go to the next one. So they want us to determine the domain of f divided by g. So f of x is 3x minus 8. G of x is 8x minus 40. All I want is the domain of f divided by g. All right, so f divided by g would be 3x minus 8 on top, 8x minus 40 on the bottom. So since it's a fraction, remember, the only thing I'm worried about is that denominator. So we know 8x minus 40 cannot equal 0. So let's solve this. Add 40 to both sides. So 8x cannot equal 40, and then divide everybody by 8. So now we see that x cannot equal a positive 5. So we would go back. And then choose the first one. X is a real number, and x, grab that cannot equal down here, and then we said that was a 5. And then we move on to the next.
Can you go back to the last one? I didn't get the last of that problem.
Oh, you want me to the yellow paper or
on
to
the pad?
Okay, let me get that pad. Let's see. And if y'all notice, they're really worried about y'all learning that domain stuff.
Okay, I have it. Thanks.
All right. All right, so that was that one. So then we're on 16 now. All right, y'all, this one they're giving me f of x equals 2x plus 9. G of x equals x to the third. They want me to find f of g of a negative 1. So this is the composition function. So let's work that out. And then we'll come put our answer in. So remember, f of g of x is like f of g of x. And they're giving me a negative 1, so I'm going to find f of g of a negative 1. So remember, you got to start with the innermost parentheses. So the first thing we find is g of negative 1. G of negative 1 will equal to g equation, x to the third, and put a negative 1 in for that x. And what's nice is we got that over here, negative 1, and then I can cube that. So that'll just be negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, which is a negative 1. Now that I know that g of negative 1 is a negative 1, I'm going to put the negative 1 into my f of x now, which means I'm finding f of a negative 1. Now, they all won't always match. It's just because we had a 1 here. Had that been a negative 2, that would have changed what I was putting into both of them. So f of negative 1 will equal 2 times negative 1 plus 9. So it's got to match the f equation and put the negative 1 in for the x. So 2 times negative 1 is negative 2 plus 9. Negative 2 plus 9 gives you 7. So my final answer on that would be a 7. So we would come up here and put in a 7. And do what? Hit enter. Okay, woo, here's the tricky one. All right, so here we go. F of x equals 6 over 1 minus 7x. G of x is going to equal 1 divided by x. So I'm finding f of g of x and g of f of x. And then I got to find the domains of both of these. All righty, y'all. So let me get my screen because this one will be a little bit of work. All right, so I had a f of x is 6. So I'm going to rewrite that. F of x is 6 divided by 1 minus 7x. And then g of x is 1 over x. So first I'll do f of g of x. So remember, f of g of x is really f of g of x. So we would start with the g of x. Well, g of x equals 1 over x, and there's nothing else I can do to that. Which means now I got to take this 1 over x and put it into the f equation. So I'm going to put that into the f of x. So f of a 1 over x will equal 6 divided by 1 minus 7 times that 1 over x. Okay, so you put the g into the f's x. All right, so I'm going to be playing with the bottom for a little bit. The 6 on top is going to come down. I'm going to make this a 1 minus. I'm going to treat the 7 like it's got a 1 on the bottom, and then it's multiply straight across. So 7 times 1 is 7. And then 1 times x is x. Now what I need to do is I got 2 parts down here on the bottom. I've got to try to turn them into a single fraction. At the moment, I've got 2 different terms here. So what I would do is find the common denominator between 1 and x, and the LCD on those would be the x. So what you'll do is multiply top and bottom of the first fraction by x. So y'all watch what happens. The 6 comes down. This 1 over 1 now becomes the x over x minus my 7 over x. So I think this one problem brings out almost everything you ever learned in math. But now here we go. We got a little rule that says A over B minus C over B can be written as A minus C over B. So if you got a common denominator, you can turn them into one fraction. Well, y'all look, I got a common denominator. So the bottom, I'm going to turn into one fraction and make that a x minus 7 all over x. All right, we're almost done. Now, 6 divided by this fraction, I'm going to turn that into multiplication and make that 6 times. Now remember, if I do multiplication, I got to flip the bottom so that I get an x over x minus 7. All right, I'd probably put a 1 under the 6, multiply straight across. 6 times x is 6x. 1 times x minus 7 is x minus 7. And y'all, that's as far as I can go on that one. But you had to really do a lot of simplifying on it. So, my domain, well, I first started off with a 1 over x. At that point, that x cannot equal 0. So since it's a single variable, the only number I'm worried about is 0. Now notice, I'm still worried about the 0, but when I get down here, I got an x minus 7 on the bottom of this fraction, and x minus 7 cannot equal 0. So we would what? Add 7. And it tells me that x cannot equal a 7. So x cannot equal 0 for this problem, and x cannot equal 7. So let me go fill in this first part of this, and then we'll come back and work the g of f. Y'all, this is probably y'all's worst problem on here, I think. So f of g of x, I said, was, let me grab the fraction-y one down here. On top, I had a 6x. And then on bottom, I had an x minus 7. And then my domain, I said, could not equal 0 and 7. So they're using interval notation. So this one's excluding 0 and 7. Whoops, my bad, y'all. Notice this one only excluded 7. This one did negative 7. And then this one only did the 0. So I need this one that excludes the 0 and the 7. All right, so now I got to figure out my g of f. So let me go back and we'll work on the g of f. All right, so let me put this right here. So g of f of x is like g of f of x. So first you would do the f of x. Well, that was what? 6 over 1 minus 7x. All right, at that point, we got to worry about the bottom. But what I'll do is I'll put all this into g first, and then we'll do all the domain at once. So since I cannot do nothing with that, that's going into the g. So I'm going to be finding g of a 6 over 1 minus 7x. So take the g equation, which is 1 divided by x. But remember, my x is going to be 6 over 1 minus 7x. So what I would do is what I did a while ago. I would treat this like a 1 divided by 6 over that. So I'm going to turn it into multiplication and flip the bottom so that I get a 1 minus 7x over the 6. So y'all, you can put a 1 under that, multiply straight across, you'll get 1 minus 7x all over 6. So if you notice, the only thing that was ever on the bottom was the 1 minus 7x. So we know that 1 minus 7x cannot equal 0. So to solve that, I would subtract 1. Negative 7x cannot equal a negative 1. And then divide both sides by the negative 7. So that's going to cancel. X cannot equal. Two negatives make a positive, so that'll just be what, a 1 over 7. So the second one, there's my function, and then it cannot equal a 1 over 7. Woo, y'all, this was a doozy here, ain't it? All righty, let's see. All right, so this I said was going to be a fraction. The top was 1 minus 7x. And then the bottom was a 6. And then we said the only thing we was worried about was the 1/7. So let's see. Oh, that'd be my D right here. All right, y'all, moving on. Oh, so use the horizontal line test to determine if this is 1-to-1, which means you're going to, a horizontal line test goes across. So you would run that horizontal line down this graph, and it cannot intersect it more than once. But y'all, if you run a horizontal line across that, it's going to hit here and here, and down here it's going to hit here and here. It's hitting twice, which violates the horizontal line test, so that would be a no. So remember, vertical line checks for functions, horizontal line checks for 1-to-1, and neither one of those can hit it more than once. Right, now these ones say determine whether 1-to-1. If it is 1-to-1, find its inverse. So I got f of x equals 9 divided by x plus 8. So if you want to check it for 1-on-1, you can graph it real quick. So go to y equals, that'll be 9 divided by, since we got more than one thing on the bottom of a fraction, we're going to put the x plus 8 in parentheses. All right, now I'm just going to graph it. So horizontal line is not going to intersect it nowhere on here more than once. So let me go to the calculator and show y'all. All right, so I put in my function 9 divided by x plus 8, and I want to see the graph, so I'm going to go to graph. And if you notice, the horizontal line does not intersect it more than once anywhere. This side looks like it's getting flat, but it's just decreasing slowly through there, okay? So it is definitely 1-to-1, which means we're going to find an inverse. So to find the inverse, we replace f of x with a y. And that gives me y equals 9 over x plus 8. Then I switch the x and y around so that I get x equals 9 divided by y plus 8. All right, y'all, so at this point, there was many things you could do. I'm just going to cross multiply to get rid of my fractions. So I got x times y plus 8 on one side. So x times y plus 8. That's going to equal to 9 times the 1, which is 9. Now remember, you could distribute that x if you want to, but since I'm solving this for the y, I'm going to come in and divide both sides by x, because that'll bring me a y plus 8, and I don't even need parentheses because there's no more x, and then this side will be 9 divided by x. All right, y'all, last step. Since they're adding 8, we're going to come in and subtract 8 from both sides so that that cancels, and I got my y equals, let's see, 9 over x minus 8. Those are not like terms, so I'm just going to keep that a 9 over x minus 8. Now, depending on the way you solve that, you might get different answers that are similar, okay? So I need to put this in, and then remember, my last step will be to replace the y with the f inverse of x notation and put in my 9 over x minus 8. Y'all think they give me the f negative 1 of x. Let's see. And we just got to put in the last part. All right, so it was 1 to 1, and then f inverse of x equaled 9 divided by x, and then arrow over, and then it was what? Minus 8. Okay, so then that was 19. We get to move to 20. All right, solve by elimination. So I got 3x plus 2y equals 34. 2x plus 3y equals, looks like a 36. All right, so I'm going to switch screens. Now remember, y'all could do this on the matrix. It'd be a 2 by 3 matrix you got to set up in there. So there's not really an easy variable to get rid of because I can't turn a 3 into a 2 or a 2 into a 3 on either one of these. So I'm going to have to change both rows. So I'm going to get rid of the x's. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this row by -2 so that I get a -6. I'm going to multiply the second row by a +3, so that'll give me a +6. So I'm going to multiply each row to change it. So let's do the top one. -2 times 3 is -6x. -2 times 2 is -4y. That's going to equal -2 times 34, which is -68. Now do the second row by 3. So you get 6x plus 9y. And then let's see, 36 times 3 would give me 108. But y'all notice what we can do now. We can now eliminate the x's, which was our whole goal. So the x's cancel. -4y's and 9y give me 5y. And then 108 minus that 68 will leave me 40. And look at that, we're down to one variable. Divide by 5, and y equals 8. So now that I know y is 8, I can back substitute 8 into either equation. So I'll just use the top one. 3 times x plus 2 times 8 has to equal 34. All right, so 3x comes down. 2 times 8 is 16. equal to 34. All right, so what we're going to do is subtract 16 from both sides. 3x equals, what's that, 18? And then y'all divide by 3 so that x equals a positive 6. Now remember, on these answers, you got to put them in ordered pairs. So 6 and then your 8. Now, you could have got rid of the y's by doing the same thing, okay? All right, so let's go put this answer in. All right, it says type in ordered pairs, so you want to use these little parentheses. And my x was what, a 6? And then my y was 8. So 6 and 8, and then we can move on. Oh, I'm gonna need more paper for this one. 7x minus a y plus a z equals negative 11. 3x plus 2y minus 3z equals 28. And then x minus 3y plus 2z equals negative 27. All right, so I'm going to label these 1, 2, and 3. So, let me see what I might get rid of here. Really, hell, any of them would be all right. But I do think the y's and the z's would be easier. So, hell, I'm going to get rid of the y's first. So what I'll do, I'm going to take row 1 and 2 first. Since this is a positive 2y and that's a negative 1y, I'm going to multiply row 1 by 2 and add to row 2. So multiply row 1 by 2 and add to row 2. Okay, so let's multiply row 1, which is times a 2. So I got 7x minus y plus z equal to negative 11. Multiplying by 2 gives you 14x minus 2y plus 2z equals negative 22. After we did that, we said add that to row 2, which is a 3x plus 2y minus 3z equals 28. What I'll do once I add them, I'm going to call that my row 4. So 14.
The pad is not showing.
Again? Oh, I might not.
Pad where
I do that too many times, y'all. Killing me. All right, so so I had them all written up here, and I was looking at the y's and the z's and the x's. So I just figured, well, I'm going to get rid of these y's here. So what I did, since that was a negative y and that was a 2y, I multiplied this row 1 by 2 and changed it to a 14x minus 2y plus 2z equals negative 22. And then I brought row 2 down to add to it. So now we're going to add them. So the 14 and 3 give you 17x. The 2y, negative 2y cancel. 2z and negative 3z give me a negative 1z. And then negative 22 and 28 give me 6. So my equation 4 will be 17x minus z equals 6. All right, y'all, what we got to do now, since I used row 1 and 2, I now have to use row 3, and I'm going to use row 1 with row 3 to get my 5th equation. Now, row 1 has a negative y, row 3 has a negative 3y. So what I'm going to do is multiply row 1 by a -3 and then add to row 3. So when you come up with the equation 4 and 5, you got to use all 3 of these, 2, and then use one of them with the other one, okay? So I'm going to take -3 and multiply by row 1, which is 7x minus a y plus a z equals -11. No, that'll give me -21x. -3, -1 is a +3y. -3 times z is a -3z. And then -3 times -11 is 33. So we multiplied row 1 by -3. Now we're going to add to the row 3, which is a x minus 3y plus 2z equals -27. All right, so let's see what happens. -21 and 1 give you -20x. The y's cancel. -3z and 2z give you -1z. And then 33 -27 give me 6. So y'all now have my row 5. So let's put 4 and 5 together. And then what was it? -20x minus z equals 6. So that was what? 4 and 5. So y'all, I'm actually going to get rid of one of these z's because they match. So I'm going to multiply row 4 by -1 and add to row 5. So I'm going to multiply row 4 by -1. So -1 times 17x minus a z equals 6. That's going to give me a -17x, a positive z, and a -6. All right, bring in your row 5, which is -20x minus the z equaled a +6. Oh, y'all, look what's happening here. That's going to give me like -37x's. The z's cancel. And y'all, -6 and 6 give me a big 0. Which means when you divide by -37, we know automatically x is 0. So then, let me pull that up. This is where we had to start back substituting. So since I know x, I'm going to get my z. 17 times 0 minus a z has to equal 6. Well, 17 times 0 is 0, so -z equals 6. Divide those by -1, and you get z is a -6. So 0 for x, -6 for z. Now you got to back substitute into one of the original 3 problems to get the y. So I'm just going to use this bottom one. It says x, which is 0, minus 3y, plus 2 times z, which is -6. All that has to equal a -27. So let's see. That's going to be -3y. 2 times -6 is -12, equals -27. All right, y'all, what we're going to do now, add 12 to both sides. So I get a -3y equals a -15. And then divide by -3. So y equals -15 divided by -3 would be what? A +5. Woo, okay, so I got a 0, a 5, and a -6. So let's go to the calculator real quick and do that one. So on with the calculator. I'm going to hit second x negative 1 to get the matrix. I'm going to go to edit, enter. So this is a 3 rows by 4 columns, 3 by 4, enter. Now we just put our numbers, 7, negative 1, 1, negative 11. The next row would be 3, 2, negative 3, 28. Then the last row would be 1, negative 3, 2, negative 27. So you got all that in, quit the screen. And then remember, I'm going to go get RREF by hitting second, x negative 1, go to math, and then arrow down to RREF, which is B on mine, hit enter. Now go get that matrix by hitting second, x negative 1. Since we put it in A, we just hit enter. Now when we hit enter, look at that, y'all. There's our 0 for the x, y was the 5, and then z was negative 6. Whew, that's a crazy one, but either way, I'll work on that, okay? So now we got to go put this into that MATLAB. So now these will be ordered triple, and they actually leave the blanks here for us. So we put in a 0. What we say was next? A 5. And then a negative 6. All right, then moving on. So we're down to 3 or 4 left, y'all. All righty, so this is the cholesterol one. So 1 egg, 1 cupcake, 1 pizza, 300 milligrams. 3 cupcakes, 4 pizza, 82 milligrams, and then 3 eggs, 1 cupcake is 843 milligrams of cholesterol. So this is the one where they want us to find the cholesterol of an egg, a cupcake, and a pizza. So let's go back and work this one. All right, so I'm going to let the eggs be my X's, the cupcakes be my Y's, the pizzas be my Z's, and then I got my numbers here. So I got 1 X plus 1 Y plus 1 Z equals 300. And you don't have to put the ones. Now, I got 0 X's, I got 3 Y, I got 4 Z's. Those are going to equal 82. And then here I got 3X plus 1Y equals 843. Now, if you're putting it in the calculator, you would put a 0 here and a 0 here for them places, okay? All right, so this is 1, 2, and 3. So you can either get rid of X's pretty quick or the Z's pretty quick. So what I think I'm going to do is get rid of these Z's up here. So to get rid of the Z, since that's a 4Z and that's a 1Z, I'm going to multiply row 1 by a negative 4 and then add to row 2. So let's take that negative 4 times row 1, which is an X plus a Y plus a Z equals 300. So really that negative 4 is going to change all the signs. So negative 4X, negative 4Y, negative 4Z, and then 300 times negative 4 is what, negative 1200? Add that to row 2, which was a 3Y plus 4Z equaled 82. So y'all, what's happening? The negative 4X comes down. Negative 4y and 3y give you negative y. The z's cancel. And then let's see, negative 1200 plus 82 is going to give me a negative 1118. Now look, x's and y's. We got a row right here that's got x's and y's. So I'm going to take this row, now add to row 3. So bring row 3 right under here. Okay, because they both had x's and y's. So notice the y's cancel. Negative 4x and 3x leaves you a negative x equal to negative 1118 plus 843 is going to give me negative 275. But remember, I got to divide by negative 1 and make that a positive 275. Actually, since you're talking about cholesterol and milligrams on this, every one of these answers better be positive, okay? Because you can't have negative cholesterol. All right, so x is 275. I'm going to back substitute and find my y. So I'm going to use this equation. 3 times 275 plus y has to equal 843. All right, so 275 times 3 is 825 plus y equals 843. And there you go, minus the 825. So y is 843 minus 825, which will give us, oh, what's that, 18. All right, now that I know both of those, I can put them into the first equation and get that z. So 1x is 275, plus 1y is 18, plus my z, all equal 300. All right, so 275 plus 18 is going to give me 293, plus my z equals 300. And y'all, the last step to get the z by itself is to subtract 293 from both sides. So that z equals 300 minus 293 would be 7. Well, so the eggs are pretty high. Pizza, I mean, that was cupcakes and then my pizza. So let's see if we can put these in and see what we got to do to put them in. I don't think they want ordered pairs on this one. I think they just ask for them each individually. Yeah, so the cholesterol of the egg, which was X, was 275. Cholesterol of the cupcakes, which was my Y, was 18. And then a slice of pizza was 7. Well, that just seems odd to me. I guess eggs are bad. All right, that was 22. Oh, I didn't go back to my screen. Yeah, I would. I'm on my screen. All right, graph the inequality. So let me write that down real quick. 4x minus 5y is less than or equal to a negative 15. All right, so let me switch you over. I'm going to do this on paper first, and then we'll put it in. So 4x minus 5y is less than or equal to negative 15. I'm going to solve it for the y first. So to do that, you got to move the 4x over by subtracting it. So y'all, that brings down to negative 5y less than or equal. These are not like terms, so I'm just going to put the x's first. So I get a negative 4x minus my 15. Now, I need to make that a 1y, so I'm going to divide everybody by negative 5. Remember, since I'm dividing by negative, I got to turn the less than around and make it a greater than and equal. So you got to flip it when you divide by that negative so that those cancel, and I now get y is greater than or equal to, negatives will cancel, making that a 4/5 x. Negatives cancel, making that a positive. 15 divided by 5 is 3. All right, so if I was going to graph this one by hand, I would always pick a 0. My second number would be a 5 because of that fraction. So if you put a 0 in here, 0 times 4/5 is 0. 0 plus 3 is 3. Now, let me show you what would happen if you put a 5 in. You know, the 5's cancel, making a 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 would give me 7. So now comes the part about graphing it. And we'll do this on the calculator also. All right, so I went out about 7 on the y's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. -7. 7 that way. And then -7 that way. So 7 was my biggest number, so I just went out 7s. So I got 0, 3. So starting at 0, go up 3. And then I got 5, 7. So going right to 5. And then up 7. So I know where my line is. I got to figure now, do I want a solid line or dotted? So since I got equals, this has to be a solid line. And since it is greater than, so always look to your solved equation. Since it's greater than, I would shade it above. All right, so also watch this calculator knock that out. I would put in my 4 divided by 5, x plus 3. Now remember, I'm shading above, so I would arrow all the way left until I'm blinking on the left side of the y equals and hit enter till I get the triangle that's above. So that triangle's above, that triangle's below. So I'm going to hit enter until I got the one above. I just wanted to show y'all what they both look like. And then hit graph, and hopefully that graph looks like what we did on paper. And if you wanted to graph it off of the calculator, you can hit second graph and get the table. So what I use, 0 and 5, so let me go to 0. So at 0, there's my 3, and then I went to 5, and I got a 7. The reason I didn't use 1, 2, 3, and 4 is because, look, they all got decimals, and I don't feel like plotting decimals and stuff, so I try to avoid plotting decimals and fractions. All right, so let's go to the test and put that in. So remember, I got to click it. Now, it's tricky on here. So the first thing, it's already got the solid line marked. Now, had you had just a less than or greater than without the equals, you'd have had to use this dotted line, okay? So we're good. So we want a line tool. My first point was 0, 3. So start at 0 and go up to 3. My second point was 5, 7. So there's 5, 7. Now, to shade on here, you take the little paint can and go stick it on the upper part. And then it shades it for me. And then I would save that and move on, okay? So remember, to shade it, you use the paint can, click it, and put it where you want to shade. All right, y'all, let's see what we got on 24. It's probably another inequality. All right, so let me write this one down. 4x. Oh, hold on. This is what? X is less than 4. So there's really no work to do on this one. We're just going to go straight to the graph, click it. Since this is only an X, it's going to be a vertical line. So watch what I'm doing. Now notice there's no equals on it, so we need to use the dotted tool. So what you'll do, grab the line tool. X is less than 4, which means we go to 4 on the x-axis and draw me a vertical line. So just click it twice in a vertical line. And then we want to shade less than. So less than for x's is to the left, greater than is to the right. So since it's less than, we're going to grab that paint can and click it over here. So that anything shaded, those x values would be less than a 4. Okay? All these x's have values of 3s, 2s, 1s, and so on. So remember, if it's an x, make a vertical line. If it's a y, it would be a horizontal line, okay? All right, y'all, I think we got one more. And that's probably a system of equations. So I got y is greater than or equal to x plus 4. Y is less than or equal to 2 minus x. All right, so I'm going to do these real quick by hand. So I got my equations here, so I'm going to make my graph. All right, so for the first one, I'm going to use 0 and 1. When x is 0, 0 plus 4 is 4. When x is 1, 1 plus 4 is 5. So my first one has 0, 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 5 is right 1 and up 5. It's got equals, so that would be a solid line. It's greater than, so this one is going to shade above up here. Now we would graph this one, and I'm still using 0 and 1. Well, if x is 0, 2 minus 0 is 2. When x is 1, 2 minus 1 is 1. So that one has a 0, 2, so go up 2. And then a 1, 1, so right 1 and up 1. That has equals, so it's also going to be a straight line. It is less than, so it's going to shade below. So I'm going to shade below the line going in the opposite directions. So y'all remember, the answer is the double shaded region right here. So when I look at my math lab, I'm going to only pick the one that has that shaded region. So I'm going to do this on the calculator real quick. So put in the x plus 4. Go all the way left. And hit enter till we got the triangle above. So I'm good now. So I'm going to go to y2 and put the other one in, which is 2 minus x. Go all the way left. And that one was less than, so I'm going to do the triangle on the bottom right there. So when I hit graph, hopefully it looks like our paper. So there's the first one, second one. And notice the double shaded area right here is the answer. So let's go to our test. Now what's nice on here, they got 4 pictures. Ours was shaded to the left like C here. And then, oh, that's the last one. So now we're going to submit this quiz and see how we do. I guess it's done. Oh, look, we did good, y'all. All right, so I'm going to stop that share. All right, y'all, so questions on that?
How much time do we have for the test?
I think I got it set up for like either 90 or 120 minutes.
Okay. And how many, do you know how many questions it is?
It's going to be the same 25. Only thing different is those numbers are, I'm going to switch the numbers up, but it's going to be the same 25 questions. So what I would do if I was y'all,
Okay.
before y'all do the actual test, do the review guide and do that study guide that I got in there, that review, and test yourself on that before you actually do the test, because the test only has one attempt. And since that study guide is just like it, if you make a 90 to 100 on that study guide, you're probably going to make that on my test, okay? The people that do bad, they don't really do the study guide before the test, so they're not getting familiar enough with it and stuff like that. But y'all should be all right if y'all do all that. All right, so I'm going to stop recording this.